Hello, and we are live. Welcome everyone to a very special Reedsy Live. It's party time. It is the launch event for the 4th edition of our literary magazine, Prompted. We've got a great lineup of things for here for you today, tonight, this morning, wherever you are. My name is Martin. I'm part of the team here at Reedsy. We're a platform that brings together authors and writers with some of the world's best publishing professionals as editors, book cover designers, translators, ghostwriters, you name it, we got them. But today we are celebrating our weekly short story writing contest prompts, and in particular the magazine that has sprung from it, which is Prompted. It is our 4th edition. It's been a long time coming, but we've now launched it, and if you have a look in the video description, you can download the digital copy of the 4th edition for free. It's got a wonderful cover design by our illustrator Raoul, and is packed with fantastic prize-winning stories from our weekly contest. And I'm really glad to say that today we've got 2 of the winners with us who will be sharing a bit of their story, and it's an opportunity for us to hear from them, talk to them about their stories. We've also got in David Restaino, the guest editor of this edition. So he's someone with a lot of experience in the world of short fiction and publishing. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to pick up some tips, hear what it's like to navigate one's way through the exciting world of short fiction. And there will be a Q&A at the end. This is sort of just the informal pre-bits. If you are in the chat, say hello, tell us where you're coming from today. We love to see that. And give us a thumbs up if you're tuning in, sort of giving us a sort of thumbs up and considering subscribing to the channel. That helps us immeasurably. So give a thumbs up. And we have here Jess from New Jersey, wonderful. Joe from the University of Iowa, Sue from Pennsylvania. We've got Kat and Pela, welcome back, Kat, a familiar name. From Kingston in Canada. My sister went to Queen's University, so we've been to Kingston. We have Chris Matthews from Somerset here in the UK. We have Michael Anderson from New Mexico. I went to New Mexico a few years ago. It was for a friend's wedding in Santa Fe. Really lovely. They weren't joking about all the altitude. Everyone was encouraging us to hydrate wherever we went. Beautiful city, though. We have Peter from the Canary Islands, Noel from New Jersey, Anna from California, Scott from Texas, Roman from USA. Roman says hello from USA, which makes me think maybe you're not in USA. Sounds like exactly like the sort of thing a spy might say. Daniel from South Africa, Lou from Massachusetts. Great to see so many people tuning in. We're just going to sit around here and just pull up a seat, pour yourself a drink, fetch yourself a slice of pizza. It's a party, it's a publishing event. Sadly, we couldn't bring any catering, but we have brought entertainment, we have brought insight and stories to share. We have Robert from Israel, we have Hector from Manchester. Michael says Santa Fe is beautiful, but there are really breathtaking places in New Mexico. Oh yeah, no doubt. I drove across the whole state. Absolutely stunning. We have Anna from Sweden, Irene from Las Vegas, Juandra from Puerto Rico. Good to see a lot of that sort of area represented in those time zones. But we have Subarna from India. Hello. We have Diane from Central California. Sir Welch has said present. Mark from Somerset. So two Somersetonians are already joining us. We have Kaushik from Washington, D.C., Kathy and Hannah tuning in together from Arizona, and Catherine from Oregon. Wow, good to see so many people joining everywhere. For those just tuning in, it's launch day, or week for the 4th edition of our literary magazine, Prompted. If you'd like to download your free copy, you can always click the description below, and you should be able to go to our Amazon store where you can get your Kindle copy, your EPUB copy for free. We will have a couple of readings from that book today, so if you're the sort of person who likes to follow along as stuff is being read, then take this opportunity to download that copy for free. But if you're a traditionalist and love your printed copies, we also have those for sale. Sadly, not for free. We have yet to conquer the cost of printing and delivery, so it is at a, I think, very reasonable price. Okay, we have now hit 8 o'clock here in the UK, which means it's midday over on the West Coast, 3 p.m. on the East Coast. I think it's about 3 or 4 in Hong Kong, 5, I think, no, it's 7 in Sydney, and half past midnight in India, if I'm correct. So for this one, I shan't be your host. This could be the last you see of me. Instead, you'll be joined by a familiar name for those of you within the Reedsy Prompts community. It is our prompts lead and the editor-in-chief of Prompted magazine, Isabella Peralta. Isabella, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing really well. I'm very excited. This is the first time that I'm hosting a launch party or some kind of online celebration for a publication that I've edited. So yeah, I'm excited to
It's,
be
it's,
here.
it's a very specific set of conditions of the online launch party for a publication you've edited, but this is
Yeah.
we should always celebrate our firsts.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, for those not familiar with prompted and prompts, what is it? Why are we here today?
Great question, Martin. I have some notes here that I'm going to refer to throughout the night. So let me start with prompts. So prompts is our weekly writing contest, and every Friday we post a new contest with a specific theme, and then there are 5 prompts related to that theme. So anyone in the world can join, and you'll have just 1 week to write a story in response to your chosen prompt. And then we have Prompted. So Prompted is our literary magazine, and it features winning stories from the prompts contest. So if you win a prompts contest, you get $250, and your story will be considered for publication in Prompted. So that's a pretty nice prize.
Nice, sweet. And I believe we have some fantastic guests joining us today. I'll let you take it away. And yeah, if you need anything, I'll just be lurking in the back. Otherwise, have fun,
Sounds
everyone.
good. Thank you. Great. All right. So first up, I'm going to bring up David Restaino, who is the guest editor of Prompted 4. So hi, David. How are you doing?
Hi, yeah, I'm good.
Hi. I have some questions for you. So, do you want to first introduce yourself a little bit? Let our viewers know who you are exactly.
Yeah. So as she said, my name is David Restaino. I'm an editor. I'm also a writer as well. So I'm in those trenches. Um,
Yeah.
I'm the associate fiction editor for the Main Review, which is a great literary magazine if no one's read it. That's just some self-promotion there.
Yeah. Always good.
I specialize in literary fiction, short fiction, and children's books, which is a very normal trifecta that everyone has. Um, but I really enjoy it a lot. I love doing this work, and I love helping people finish their books. So
Yes, and you are a freelancer on Reedsy. So if anyone wants a freelancer's help, David's here for you. Actually, yeah, my first question that I want to ask you is related to that. So can you tell us a bit more about your background as a writer and editor?
yeah, so I kind of got into writing a little bit late. I took my first, I guess, like official writing class when I was in university, and it was because of that
Mm.
that I ended up applying to grad school for it.
Mm.
So it's never too late. Um, I've written off and on, mostly short fiction. I also do flash fiction and poetry. So I really focus a lot on the intention behind every word and every sentence.
Mm.
I started editing when I was in university. I started with an internship at a really small publishing company called Egg Box Press. It's up in Norwich in the UK.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then I ended up working nonprofit for a while, which was really weird. Um,
Mm.
but ended up working with this nonprofit that specialized in children's literature and literacy rates, and part of their project was creating books to help promote reading. And so I was kind of
Mhm.
spearheading that project for them, and then I shifted into freelance work from there. So
That sounds really cool. So you were in England for a bit.
yeah, I actually still live in the UK. So I was in Norwich and now I live in London.
Ah, okay, nice. I'm also based in England, so I was just
Yeah.
wondering. Yes,
Were you
and
doing
where are
were you
you?
doing
Oh,
anything with
sorry.
sorry with were you doing anything with University of East Anglia? Or I know they've got a good creative writing
Yeah, that
program there.
was I did my MFA there. So I graduated from
Nice.
UEA.
Nice. I think was like the sort of first proper like creative writing course here in the UK. I think Ishiguro did it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
very
so.
well known. Yeah, yeah. Cool. I Well, I have another question for you. But before
Mhm.
that, can you quickly tell us where you're joining us from? I forgot to mention that earlier, because you're in a very interesting
Um,
place right now.
yeah, I'm in Tokyo. I wish it was for like a really exciting writing reason that I could like fold into this, but
Yeah.
my twin brother is actually graduating med school and is about to start his residency program, and this was
Oh,
sort of like a celebration trip for him. So
I
that's why
see.
I'm here.
Yeah, because it's like really, it's pretty late or early where you are, right? It's like
Yeah,
5, I
it's
think.
like 5 in the morning, but with jet lag, I feel like it's
Yeah.
okay. So
Well, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate that you took the time to
I'm
wake
glad
up
to be
before
here.
5 a.m. to chat with us. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, for my second question, it's related to you as a writer. So, as
Mhm.
a writer whose work has been featured in different publications, what about the short story format appeals to you the most?
Oh man. Um, I think there's a lot of reasons that it appeals to me. One of the main ones is that even in my own life, I've always been a sprinter. I can't do long
Mm.
distance. So writing a novel
Yeah.
just seems, when people come to me with a novel, I'm just floored. I'm like, I can't believe you got this many words out. I struggle with
Yeah.
5,000. So, um, that's part of it, but I also like the sense that there's so much play and structure and form that sometimes you can't do with a novel. A novel
Mm.
has this sense of gravity, of weight, that eventually kind of shapes it into the form it needs to be. But with
Mm.
short fiction, especially flash fiction, which I write a lot of, it ends up being so amorphous that you have to find the perfect vessel for it, and it can be so many different things, and it can
Yeah.
change the story in so many different ways, and I think that's what I like so much about it.
Yeah. Um, this is a mini question, but do you have a preference? I'm curious, like flash fiction or just, I don't know, a 5,000 word story. What would you prefer to write if given the choice?
I think flash fiction at the moment,
Okay.
but it's been kind of a more recent turn. I think only in the last few years that I've really started writing a
Yeah.
lot of flash fiction.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, I don't write a lot of flash fiction. And I think like I respect anyone who can really pack a punch in just a
Mm,
few like just a very short story in 100 words, for example.
yeah.
I don't think I could do that. But yeah, related to stories, I've got my third question for you. So you've previously been a guest judge actually for one of our prompts contests. What
Hmm.
elements make a winning story stand out to you? And maybe like, a lot of people who are watching right now, they want to join a prompts contest. They're curious, how can I win? What do you think about, winning stories and how they can stand out?
Yeah, I think it's really tough, especially with such an interesting contest like Prompted, because you get such a range of stories. When I did it, I
Yeah.
had like westerns, there was sci-fi, fantasy, um,
Yeah, yeah.
and so
There's
it's
so many
it's really
different
hard.
genres.
Yeah, and that's the exciting thing about the Prompted contest, because it gives you such an amazing breadth of story, but it is also so hard to take two such different things, and sort of like not compare them, but see how they stack up against each other.
Yeah,
So I really do try to turn back towards element of story that helps convey what it's trying to do as efficiently as possible. So I really do think about um, character first. I think about, is the narrative voice strong? Is it
mm,
something that I feel is unique to the story and that supports what's happening in the story? I think about the beginning and the endings together. I think about how where we enter and exit a story work, and how they not necessarily communicate with each other, but how they reinforce what's happening. So when you get to the end, it not only feels like you've finished the story, but it feels like the story has to end there because we started it in a specific place. And I think those
yeah.
are the main things that I look for.
Yeah. No, I love that last bit especially. I love when I read a story and well, I guess like you can see that there's a connection when you have the beginning and the end, and you read that final word and you just go like, whoa. or 10 minutes later you're still thinking about it, the next day you're still thinking about it. I love stories that resonate like that way.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Well, now we are going to hear from someone who has written a story and, it actually won the props contest. So, Dawn, how are you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well. How are things where you are? Where do you mind sharing like where you're joining us from?
Yeah, I'm in my office just outside of New York. Um, it's the middle
Nice.
of the workday, so still grinding away over here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'm guessing maybe you're on your lunch break or something. So thank you for spending your
Yeah,
lunch break with us.
absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry?
I said absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I was sorry. I was just going to ask if you want to introduce yourself, and say hi to our viewers and share a bit about who you are, what you do, your writing.
Sure. I'm Don Fazio. I've been writing too since college, but I'm an attorney, so a lot of the writing I do is professional, and I really miss doing the creative writing. So I got back into it when I learned about the Reedsy prompt, which is the contest brings out a great community of people. So I met a lot of
Yeah.
people who through the contest who helped me workshop and learn a little bit more to hone the craft and get a little better. And then eventually, my story started getting a little more, interest from the community, and I won a couple of the contests as a result. So it's been a really cool thing to get involved in.
Yeah, and your story actually was the inspiration for Prompted For's cover. So, our in-house designer Raul, he created a cover based on Lost and Found, which you can read in Prompted For. What were your initial thoughts when you saw the cover? Did you expect it to look like that, or because you have some very memorable characters, did you expect this kind of design or not really? What were your initial thoughts?
I was really excited because I knew that it was based on the story that I wrote, which in turn
Yeah,
was inspired by some actual people, and so I thought they did a really good job of bringing to life what I had imagined in my mind for the story and the
yeah.
characters,
Oh, I'm glad to
and I
hear.
had not expected it to be based on my story, so I was really floored when I saw it.
Yes, I think Raul did just such an amazing job. I'm going to ask you a bit about, like the inspiration behind your story and all of that. But first, can we hear an excerpt from your story?
Sure, Isabella. Um, so this is the excerpt from Lost and Found. On my last shift as a lighthouse keeper, I climbed the two ladders and 76 spiral iron stairs to the watchroom. The number of steps the same as my age. The thwomp and snare of each step an ominous background score. Something wasn't right. What I didn't know then was at that very moment Richie Tedesco was pointing a fire extinguisher at the burning electrical panel in the engine room of his boat a few miles offshore. The placard in the watchroom read, Marge Maberty, Lightkeeper. First lighted the depths on March 2nd, 1985. Hasn't missed a night. Already so close to 40 years, I could still read the skies like a book. The lighthouse smelled of aging wood, dried out moss, and the bitter acid spritz of corrosion. But standing on the gallery deck, leaning against the handrails, there was the unmistakable scent of petrichor. The clouds in the distance billowed, black shadows growing across their swelling bellies, and the storm caps flattening under the weight of the system. I tasted the metallic hint of ozone on my tongue. I felt the intensity of the pressure in my ears and on my forehead. I know what you were thinking. Why had I even done it for all these years? I guess finding lost things was always my one and only skill, and I didn't know if I could give it up. A few miles toward the mainland, Cappy patrolled the Long Island ports and seaways, on his tug, waiting for salvage and rescue calls. There were still enough to get by, especially with these yahoos taking up boating. But the seas weren't what they used to be, and Cappy barely eked out a life of sustenance back on land. Lone rangers like us were going extinct in this world of ubiquitous connection, of universal alienation. It was a world of gadgets now, but it turned out our kind was needed more than ever when the gadgets failed. The three of us in our solitary orbits were set on an intersecting course.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Um, I have some questions now that I'd like to ask you.
Oh, before
Um,
you do, Isabella,
oh
I've
yeah.
forgotten what was the prompt for this story.
Oh, great question, Dawn. What was the prompt for this story?
Yeah, so the prompt was set your story in a lighthouse surrounded by powerful gale force winds.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so related to that, what you do such a great job in you do such a great job writing in the voice of Marge and bringing her character to life. So in addition to the story prompt, what inspired you to write about a lighthouse keeper set to retire?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the prompts for me really, for years when I was trying to write, it was always, what am I going to write about? And these prompts
Yeah.
really make it easier to narrow down and come up with some good stories about things that you
Yeah.
care about, but starting from a place you might not have started from. So in this case, I said, what kind of characters are involved in lighthouses today? And I started looking up and I found a story online about a woman, Sally Snowman, who was retiring this last year when I wrote the story from Boston Harbor as the lighthouse keeper. And I read a little bit about her, and then it made me think of, okay, what if there was a woman in Montauk in the New York area that was like this, and what if there was somebody still working in a lighthouse out there, and what kind of a life would they have, and what if they were also retiring? And so I thought the retirement
Mhm.
theme that got me onto the theme of loss, and then that's how I came up with that character and started to think about, okay, what's the premise going to be for the incident? There's going to have to be somebody that needs the lighthouse that needs help, and then that's where I got my third character, which was Cappy, who's also
Mm.
based on somebody that I know who does boating. So then I had my three characters and started to get the story together.
Yeah, I mean, they have such distinct voices. How do you write characters like that? Like, how, for example, did you ensure that Cappy and Marge would sound so different, but yet they're dynamic? It's such a joy to read.
Well, I take that as a great compliment, and I think a good, like, I'm not like a professional writer or somebody who's got a lot of writing credentials as of now, but just like you guys, in college I was an English major. I was in writing groups and was interested and did internships involved with writing. So I have a
Hmm.
little bit of background, but I always used to write from my own experience. Like I used to always write characters that were like me. And
Yeah.
when I started doing these contests, I made it a real goal of mine to write from other people's perspectives, which made
Mm.
writing so much more fun for me. And that was the biggest thing that I've taken away from the prompted, and the Reedsy contest is the developing characters that have different experiences than you do and trying to write from their voice and their perspective. And as I've gotten better
Yeah.
at that, I think I've become a better writer.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
And
intuitive. I think it's something you just have to try to do, and then it's not as hard as you think.
yeah. And as someone who, is an attorney and you work so many hours a week, how do you find the time to actually write, like write creatively?
Okay, so on a related note, what I do as an attorney is very
Mm.
similar to writing a story like this in the sense that all of our clients have like a story to tell, and usually you put a certification into the court from their first person perspective saying, this is what happened to me. I did this happened and this happened, this happened. And
Right.
you write it in their voice for them and then they sign it. So I tried to take that experience and use it with the writing. But in terms of how do I find time to write, I just made like a commitment to myself, just like, you'd make a commitment at the beginning of the year to go to the gym, to put a certain amount
Mm.
of time, 30 minutes aside every night to try to do one of these prompts. And once I started doing that, so at first I was just plotting out the stories. I couldn't actually get to writing. And then I came up with some techniques to get to the writing faster. And when I had something good going, I would sometimes pull an all nighter and stay up all night because I liked what I was doing and I was having
Yeah.
fun with it. But I thought that consistency of doing it every day is really helpful because you start to feel like a writer. You start to, work those muscles and think in those terms, and you have work product that you get done each time. And then that motivates you to keep going. So that was the big thing for me was the daily consistency, even though it was small.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm similar. I try to write every day if I can. I know people who, they only write when they feel bursts of inspiration, and other people, they force themselves to just sit down, even if it's just 10 minutes a day. And I'm definitely more of like the latter. Yeah, well, in terms of prompts, this is my last question for you. What's your favorite type of prompt on Reedsy prompts?
Yeah, so I really like these prompts that have like a place restriction or a
Hmm.
restriction where they give you the premise. Like some of the ones that I did well with that I liked were set your story during the polar winter, um,
Mm,
and write about someone that lost their sense of touch. So I think when you start out with like a premise in hand, it, it to craft the story around the premise. For me, I start by trying to figure out who a good character is that would have a problem in that situation,
yeah.
and then as soon as you have a character in mind, then you really flesh that character out. Then you can put them into this problem and see what they would do. And it's fun. It's fun to not know at the beginning and try to imagine, okay, what's this person going to do in this situation? How are they going to get to the end of the
Mm,
story? And the better, I guess, you do with that, thinking through that, the better of an ending you get, and the better of an overall story you get.
yeah.
But I have
Sounds.
trouble doing it without having the prompts. The prompts really help you to focus.
Aw. Well, I'm glad to hear that you find them really useful, and that you're still writing stories using them. We have several people who've been using our prompts for years, which is always nice to see. And yeah, our community is growing, and I love our community, and it's also very supportive. So yeah, I'm glad that you're a part of it.
Yeah, I really
Um,
like what you're saying there, Don. This idea that sometimes when you know, sort of faced with the idea of writing something, there's like too many options, and by having
mm,
these restrictions, like there's only really a certain number of ways that the story can go, and so that allows you to have that sort of discipline. And yeah, I have that problem as well, where if
yeah,
faced with the blank page, there's just like too many potential options.
it's too overwhelming. Yeah.
Understood.
That's why we've got the prompts. Yeah. um, well, we have David here, and David looked at your story, edited your story. So yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, this is the first time you two are properly meeting online, so you get to hear David's live feedback. But David, do you want to share some thoughts on Dawn's story, and also, like the editing process, or anything you want to share about the story?
Yeah. Um, I remember reading it. I think it was actually one of the first ones I worked on, just randomly by happenstance.
Mm,
But I think this piece and the next piece as well, I don't know if this was intentional, but both of them had such striking sense of place. Um, and I really wanted to try to retain that in this piece when I was editing. Editing is a lot. It's sometimes thinking about what not to change when as well as thinking about what can be improved upon. And when I was working on this piece, the sense of place, this description of weather, and the cast of the sea, it was so much that added texture to the piece. Um, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was that it's kind of subverts the typical lighthouse story, or that it's sort of like a place of isolation, whereas in this piece it really is sort of a connection, and it links these other characters together. When I was editing it, one of the things that I really wanted to try to strengthen was this sense of constellation that the piece has. I think at the end of the reading that we did, it talks about how it sort of brought these three different characters together, and I wanted to try to, um, I suppose, emphasize that through the narrative voice and sort of link them together without making the narrative, the characters bleed into each other. So finding a way to do that through language and the structure of those sentences really was something that I was wanting to try to bring through on the piece.
As
Dawn, do
a
you have any
writer, it was
thoughts on
cool to have an
that?
editor. I haven't had that experience too many times. Like as a lawyer, sometimes I'm editing like junior lawyers like briefs and things, but I haven't had this. This is the first time I've had an editor, and when I was reading the comments, I was like, every single thing he wrote, I thought was exactly right, and then I just wish I had thought of some of those things before when I was up the story. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that I really enjoy doing as well as an editor is taking a piece and thinking, wow, like I wonder if maybe this can help. Um, And it is this like really exciting relationship when you find someone that works well with you. Is that for me, the most important thing is not to change a story or to shift it into what I want it to be. It's really to try to, it's almost like writing, as you were talking about, from a new person's perspective. It's really trying to set myself into the writer's situation and think about what they're trying to accomplish with the work, and then asking how we can reinforce that through minor or sometimes structural changes.
When I saw the changes, I thought, like, when I looked at the red line and what was the difference, it some of the things were not like huge changes, but like overall, it just made the whole thing so much clearer when you added those in.
Mm. I'm glad I'm glad you liked the edits. It's always
Yeah,
horrifying when you're just like, no.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way at all. I was super excited about it.
Do either of you have any final thoughts? Because if not, then I'm going to, I'll be happy to introduce our next prompted for author. No? Okay. Okay. All good then. Is Madeline around?
Yes,
It makes
I'm
it sound like
here.
we're a medium. It's like, is Madeline in the room with us?
Yes, she's somewhere lurking. Hello. She's here. Hello. Hi Madeline. How are you
Hello.
doing? How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, I am really happy that you're here because I really enjoyed your story, and so I'm glad that I get to ask you questions live tonight, and just hear a bit more about like your writing process and your inspiration, like the inspiration behind your story and all of that. Um, yes, so but I first have to ask you, do you want to let the people know a little bit about yourself and share where you're joining from?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm at home today, which is just outside of Dallas, Texas for me. I saw a couple other Texans in the chat, which I love. And I have been writing for as long as I can remember and reading as well. It's always been something that I loved. And that's kind of what led me to where I am now. I decided to study creative writing at the University of Iowa, as well as violin performance. And I graduated from there almost 2 years ago. And about a year ago from now, I decided that I wanted to really make a go at being an author. So I've been very grateful to Reedsy for giving me the chance to go public with my work and connect with others and giving me the confidence to keep trying.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have you as part of our community. And I'm very excited to hear you read an excerpt from your story. First, can you let us know what the prompt was
Yeah,
that you wrote?
sure. The prompt for my story was: imagine a world where exploration is forbidden and write a story about a character who defies this rule to satisfy their innate curiosity.
Ooh,
Okay,
very long
and
prompt.
here's my story. Yes. Don't ever step foot on the ground. Charlie had been told this his entire life, but it never really sunk in. He didn't understand the deep-seated fear everyone else seemed to harbor. He thought it was incredible, a beautiful problem to be solved, until he was laying on the floor of the lab, staring at the ceiling and blinking away tears. Charlie was 12 the first time he saw the ground consume a person. What the tree chop teachers referred to as live mummification was a quick, disturbing process. Dirt crawled over skin to create a sort of exoskeleton, a casting of the human body, like those papier-mâché spheres they'd made in class years ago. It had been an elderly lady the first time. The pulley system keeping her safe had malfunctioned, and she lurched off balance. It was a code yellow bridge and wasn't fully enclosed. The lady stumbled to the side and flipped right over the edge. Charlie caught only a flash of the swarming ground on her skin before his mom ushered him away. As the crowd around them shrieked and cried, Charlie craned his neck for a better look. He'd like to have claimed this moment as the catalyst for his obsession, but it wasn't. That moment had occurred years ago, maybe a few days after his 7th birthday, when he was crossing the old rope bridge by his house. It was built in a rush by early survivors trying to escape their homes. He wasn't supposed to be on it, but that had only made him more intent on using it. One of the rotten wooden planks had splintered under his front foot and sent him toppling forward. It was only due to some stroke of luck that his hips didn't fit through the empty space and his arms had gotten tangled in the ropes. His leg hung down, exposed, 10 feet off the ground. Then his new shoe, a size too big so he could grow into it, slipped off his foot. It landed on the dusty ground and tipped over sideways. Charlie's breath caught in his chest, but nothing happened. The shiny shoe glistened under the sun. He wanted desperately to stick his finger in that restless dirt, see what would happen. He stayed put for longer than was logical, just in case, but the ground remained flat and motionless. The shoe was not alive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed reading that story, especially because it's just so unlike any story I've read before. So first, I wanted to ask you, so you could have gone so many different ways with this story prompt. How did you come up with the concept of the ground as like a dangerous force?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I really always strive to be unique in what I do. So I'm always happy to hear that. That compliment means a lot to me. But I'll sort of walk you through my process when I read this prompt and I decided I had to do something with that. The first question I sort of had to figure out was, why is exploring forbidden? And the answer that I came to, pretty obviously, was exploring is dangerous. Okay, so then why is it dangerous? Well, I wanted to sort of think about exploration and what that is and what I picture when I think of that. And to me, it's this sort of expedition, this discovery of the natural land. And with that, I came up with two options for the danger: the sky and the ground. So I threw out some ideas for both. I had this one of not being able to go out in the sun or something, but what really captured me about the ground being forbidden was this image of cities becoming this expanse of tree houses and bridges that are all connected. So I rolled with that, and of course, the next question with that is, what's wrong with the ground? And I really liked the thought of the ground being alive, something that could like reach out for you and envelop you. And my explanation for that became, what if there's insects in the ground that cause it to move like that? And it just sort of spiraled from there. I can't even really say where the idea for the insects came from. It just sort of like appeared to me, and I really I enjoyed the idea of that, as horrible as that sounds. And then I remember I wrote a few paragraphs on my first day with the prompt. And then that night, I legitimately could not sleep because this story wouldn't leave me alone. And I just laid in my bed, unable to sleep, and wrote the entire plot for the story in my head that night and wrote it down the next day.
So did it take you just how long did it take you to write the whole thing from start to finish?
Really, I believe it was 2 or 3 days.
Wow, okay. Yeah, because like
Mhm.
some people, they write a story really quickly. Other people I've noticed, they take the full week, because everyone only gets a week, right, to
Mhm.
respond to the prompt. Yeah, but I guess like when inspiration strikes, and I've definitely experienced pulling a somewhat all-nighter just to get a story down. It's just it won't like my brain won't stop thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not a desired all-nighter, but I could not sleep because that
Yeah.
story was just, it was haunting me.
Well, I really, really, I mean, I keep saying it, but I really enjoyed your story. And anyone who is watching, please download Prompted 4 or buy a copy. And you can find out what happens because some things happen, but I don't want to spoil anything for any of you. Um, so my second question is related to world building, because that's such an important element of your story in particular. How do you approach world building? With this story or just like with anything you've written. Yeah, how do you approach world building?
Yeah, it's a little bit different with a short story because I really don't have the time to explore the world as much as I would
Mm.
like to. I think you have more time when you have a longer form of fiction, and you can really dig into the minor details of like, there's a lot of questions that can be answered from a world where you can't touch the ground, or a world where there's, deadly bugs in the dirt.
Yeah.
But I don't get to answer those in my short story. So I have to be like super concise with my words and my descriptions. And I tried to sort of combine my action and my plot with these descriptors of the world itself. So, like in those first paragraphs that I just read, that's exploring the world as much as it is exploring the psyche of Charlie.
Hmm. Thank you for that. And I do want to ask you a similar question before we ask for David's thoughts. Well, I asked this to Dawn already, but what's your favorite type of prompt on Reedsy prompts?
Yeah, so I actually would answer very similarly to Dawn on that
Oh,
question.
okay, okay. Good for
Yeah,
me to know
my
because I make the
I
prompts,
know,
so
yeah,
I guess that's
I
what
was
people
interested in
want.
that too. Yeah, definitely. I would say like the more specific prompts are my favorite.
Mm,
If you look at the prompt that I used, it's like it's got everything laid out for you, basically the plot and the character
good.
motivation. But
Yeah.
I used that, and I was able to still be creative with it and
Mm,
make it my own. So I think I do think that the restrictiveness can actually breed more creativity. And I think that people who are looking to prompts to help inspire them to write would like that more specific nature, because that's more inspiring, and it limits all of the other ideas. Like
mm,
I believe Dawn said, it can get overwhelming if there's too many things up
yeah.
in the air. So yeah, that was my answer as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting how even if you're given, for example, like a set of guidelines or just certain boundaries, it can be freeing in a way, like in ways you wouldn't expect. So yeah, um,
Yeah.
Da- David, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, or do you want to talk about the editing process for Madeline's story?
Yeah. Um, I mean, as was mentioned, I thought the world building was really well done. World building in short fiction can be really tricky, and I think the use of exposition in the opening really helped establish it almost immediately, which helps move the reader into the story so efficiently. And that's something that I think is overlooked a lot. I think the use of exposition and the power of exposition is sometimes diminished when we think about approaching a story. Um, but I think it works really well here. One of the things, right? I think I was thinking about two things when I was editing this piece. The first was how can we tighten some of the language for like a visual impact, like use of verbs, because there was so much strong language in the piece that sometimes I was coming across it and I was like, oh, well, I think we can push this further, thinking about sort of like the setting and the tone of the story. And I was thinking a lot about that, and just in the sense of working it more cohesively, like how do different verbs and different actions allude to what happens later in the story. And so I was thinking a lot about that, which sounds very, very specific, but sometimes you have to be. And I think the other thing I thought about was because I love the setup of the story of how we enter into this moment and then we circle back around to it. And um, I like that structure of story a lot. That kind of like a little bit of a spiral. So the question then became, how do we make sure the reader stays engaged as it's going? And I was thinking a lot about tension and where to bring tension into the writing itself that already has so many tense moments in it. And so, sort of playing with the fluctuation of tension a little bit. And that's um, so easily done in ways that I don't think a lot of people think about, which is like sentence length and how long or short a paragraph runs, and like where do you break a scene. And so I think like minor things like that was what I was thinking about. And I really wanted, what I wanted to do when I was editing the piece was making sure that we're in this world and we're in this interesting character's perspective who, not to give it away, is so strange in such a weird world, and wanting to make sure that the reader stays along in that ride to the very end. And so I think that's what I was thinking a lot about when I was reading it.
Yeah, I love that. I think I remember there were a couple word changes that you made where you specifically said, I want this to sound more scientific to fit into the story. And I really liked that. I liked the idea of continuing that even to the tiniest,
Mm.
granules in the story. And I think you did a really excellent job with the edits and fixing all of my little bobbles and making the story much more cohesive. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think I'm a stickler for language working in such a short medium like short fiction and flash fiction. Um, it's so much easier to sort of fall out of a character voice because it's in such a condensed space. Um, and so really when I read pieces, one of the things I think about is, well, who is this character and how can we position every single thing to sound like it's what they're saying? And there, like as you mentioned, I think there's just a few places that I was reading that I was like, well, I think we can pull this in tighter. And if we pull it in tighter, then it's going to just sound so much more like him in a piece that already has so much of his character voice throughout.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both for sharing your thoughts and answering my questions, Madeline. Do you have any other things that you'd like to share before we move on to the next part and the final part of this launch party, which is the Q&A session? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you for those
All
wonderful
right.
questions.
Yeah.
Cool. So before Isabel, we get to the end, I would like to remind everyone if they stick around to the end, we're going to be doing a giveaway where you have a chance
Yes.
to win a charming printed paperback copy of this edition of Prompted. So if that's an incentive to stick around. We'll have a Q&A now. So if anyone has any questions for anybody in particular, feel free to address them at individual writers or at David. We'll have a little bit of a Q&A and then we'll give away some free books. Cool. Well, I think it takes a while for people to actually ask some questions there. So, yeah. So, Don, do you ever find yourself, having now sort of got into the practice and habit of writing creatively to stop that from leaking into your legal work?
I think I've always been creative in the legal field. I think it's there's a lot of artistry to the legal writing and oratory, so it's fun to. I've always wanted to be an actual writer and do this stuff more. So it's kind of an exciting journey to be doing that now a little bit. And yeah, it leaks in for sure.
Ooh, we have, I guess, a procedural question from Noel. Ask, how long are these prompts? How many words or pages are allowed? So I guess a little bit of background about the weekly contests.
Okay, I can be the one to answer those two questions. So, in terms of how long are these prompts? Well, the prompts that we post every Friday are usually around one sentence long. There isn't any kind of, set rule like, oh, it should be a certain number of words or number of characters. But in terms of how many words or pages are allowed. So if you want to write a story in response to one of the prompts that we post, you have to write a story between 1,000 and 3,000 words. So we look at word count, not page count. Yep.
Yeah, and so like the sort of to give you an idea, this week's contest is sort of all around illusion of reality. So some of the ones that people are working on this week include write a story inspired by the ultimate cliched twist. It was all just a dream. That feels like a trap. That feels like an awful trap. Center your story around a character's addiction or obsession. Center your story around a character who successfully or unsuccessfully escapes their fate. It's interesting because I think for this one we have sort of broadened out the sort of remit, the sort of stuff that Don and Madeline were talking about. Of we do have quite often these very specific prompts. I guess what are the sort of different flavors of prompts that we have out there, Isabella?
Oh, we have so many different kinds of structures for prompts. And I've been prompts lead since last year. So I've kind of seen what more like certain prompts that are writers like more so than others. Like, for example, prompts that ask the writer to include a specific line I found do really well. Like, write a story that includes the line, "Don't do it." Um, that always does really well. We also have prompts with a certain structure, like set your story in a blank. And so you could have, I don't know, in a car, all set in a car, or in a cafe, or in a restaurant, or just before a storm. So those do really well. I could I could talk about this for like a whole hour, so I'm not gonna get into everything. But yeah, there you
We've
go.
got
Those
a
are some examples.
question here from K-dramas were good. Uh, Sounds judgmental of the state of K-dramas now. What's the best approach if you want to write about a character whose career you're not familiar with? I struggle with that feeling that it might not feel authentic. I guess, Don, perhaps you could take this one. You very specifically in your story wrote it from the perspective of people who very specifically are not attorneys at law.
So I've been doing this a lot with is exploring things that I don't have experience with, which I think is a great idea to do that with your stories. But I mean, obviously, there's people like you were talking about Reacher before we started. There's people that write crime fiction, so they kind of get to know like, okay, we got cops, we got investigators, we know what they do. Some of the writers that are really popular in that genre have a background in the field, but if you don't, I think it's great to do some research, and you're going to learn some interesting stuff, and put yourself in their shoes. Just imagine what it's like. There's enough commonalities in all of our day to day, commuting to work, dealing with bosses, dealing with subordinates, dealing with this, that, and the other, that you can find the common ground. If you just have some specific details about what they specifically do that you got through your research, you can put it together.
Like David, when you're dealing with manuscripts or clients, is there sort of a marked difference between something that is not actually true to life and something that doesn't feel authentic? I guess there isn't sort of that obligation for it to accurately represent, how these characters are.
Yeah, I think that there's so many different ways to come at that, but I think it's one of those things that's kind of a double-edged sword. Like when people say doctors are the worst patients. Sometimes when you know too much about something, or if you're so familiar with something, it becomes second nature. You don't always remember the small, minute details that you have to do day to day to make something work. When I'm thinking about this, the thing I always remind my clients is that you're not writing about, for instance, you're not writing about every single criminal attorney. You're writing about this specific criminal attorney. And so it's really making sure that even though you might be dealing with something that isn't familiar to you, you're writing about it in a very minuscule space. It's about this one particular person, just as an example. So when it comes to authenticity, I think I focus more on how is the specific character engaging with that role in their life. So it might not necessarily be how authentic is this to the career at large, but how authentic it is to this character in this moment in time.
That's great. Thank you. I've got a question here that I'm going to push to Madeline. Mentioning for the writers, do you ever pick up your story again and continue adding to it? Or do you write it, submit it, and let it be? Madeline, I guess you're sort of in that phase where you are trying to write more and build up to something. And yeah, the story you've had has such this rich world that it's very easy to get lost in. Have you ever been tempted to expand anything?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely be open to expanding this story. I've gotten quite a lot of feedback that says I probably should. So I definitely think it's possible to continue adding to it. And I can think of an example right off the top of my head as if you know Wool, the Wool series by Hugh Howey. Those started off as a series of short stories, and he put them together into, I think there's 3 novels of them. They're very good. You should all go read them. And yeah, I do. So the answer to the question is yes. Sometimes you do add on to it. Sometimes you don't. But I would always be open to adding on. This story or this world that I've created has a lot to it. So.
Yeah, Wool's a great example. We always use that talking about like self-published sort of triumphs. It's now, I think, turned into the Apple TV series Silo. David, you can watch that with your stolen logins. But I think that one, the pilot episode, is basically Wool, I think, and then the rest of the series, spoiler alert, follows different characters as that sort of builds out into this quite fertile land there. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, okay. Here's one for David. Sort of cultural differences. Do you see significant differences between US and UK writers? I guess not only in like I don't know, the habits. Can you sort of tell when you're getting a manuscript of the sort of style of story or the style of prose, and not just the S's and the extra U's?
Yeah, I mean the spelling is an immediate giveaway usually. What's so interesting is that quite often on Reedsy, when I get a client, I don't actually know where they're from. Um, so I kind of go into it blind culturally in that sense. Um, in a short answer, no, not necessarily. I think when you're thinking about it in a larger sense, in terms of like the book industry, there are slightly different things that, like tropes and trends that just are more popular in different places. For instance, the cozy murder mystery, I think, really took off in the UK, and is a really established genre, where I think it's only really kind of finding traction now in the United States in the past couple of years. So sometimes when I get one of those, I'm like, yeah, they're from they're from Oxford. Got it. But in general, no. I think writing has become so accessible, or reading has become so accessible, that it's not necessarily limited by geographic location as it used to be even 10, 15 years ago. And so you're getting so much more influence on a global scale that it's really hard to tell, like, sometimes where people are from. I'm currently working with a client who pulls a lot of inspiration from sort of Far East literature, and that comes through well, but he's not based there at all. So I think, in the sense of um, different styles, no, I think it's very much becoming more and more difficult to see a difference between these things, which I think is a good thing. I don't see it as an issue at all.
What's the sort of how can you tell? What's the Far Eastern influence? Is it a bit more episodic? I tend to find that's the case with sort of East Asian literature.
Yeah, I think it has to do with sort of like the different ways that the novel evolved over time. I can talk about this until we run out of like the universe. But yeah, I think it has to do with a lot about how novels are developed culturally over time. So in the Far East, it draws from a lot of different structural components, including things like in Japan, um, haiku and waka style poetry, which is very centered on individual moments. And then those are typically linked together. So I'm thinking of like Territory of Light by Yuko Tsushima, which is sort of like a novel in episodic moments of like a woman and her daughter. So that kind of comes into play a lot, which is sort of about linking things as opposed to something that moves start to finish in a chronological moment, which I think is much more quintessential of Western style novels. Not that they're limited to that at all, but
Yeah.
just in like a very general, broad view.
I've got a great question here from Mike, who says, the best novels are often stories of change, built on a fulfilling character arc. Do you still see the same need for an arc in short stories? If so, any thoughts on doing this in fewer than 3,000 words? Like, Don, I guess, for your stories, like, I think David sort of talked about having the beginning and the end sort of match up in a way. Is this sort of arc something that you work with in your stories, or do you see it more as a bit of a snapshot of a character in time?
Yeah, I look for the arc, and I find those stories more fulfilling myself, and therefore those are the ones I try to do. And I've been reading a lot more as I've been writing a lot more, and the stories I really like are the ones where I see a character make some kind of decision about their life or make some kind of change in their life as a result of something that happened to them in the story, and it makes sense in the context of the story, the premise, everything else, and it feels like really fulfilling how it all concluded. So that's what I'm trying to do myself. I have a little like worksheet before I start where I try to see if I actually have a like plot that does that or not. And sometimes I don't know what the change is going to be, and then have more. You end up with more of the snapshot story if you don't have that final change. But sometimes it could be something slight. I think that's where you can get hung up, because some of the best stories are just somebody's changed their perspective about their lot in life, or they changed how they feel about someone else in their life, or some relationship or some concept, and it wasn't some big thing, like they changed their career. And so those can be the best stories sometimes. It's hard to define it, but I think that for me, the ones that have the character arc are the best.
Madeline, do you have the sort of similar sort of approach? I guess the sort of more, this arc built into your short stories. Sorry, I think.
I'm sorry. Definitely, I think that character arcs can be done in short stories. They do have to be smaller. They can't be as in depth, just due to the nature of the thing. But if you sort of look at my story, I don't think there is a lot of change in the character so much as there is a revealing of the character. But he does make a change in that he decides to go out and do something. I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, I don't think it has to necessarily be like a change in the personality. Yeah, I think that's where I'll leave that.
Cool. I'm a little bit conscious of time, and we still have to give these books away. While we get that done, maybe we'll thank Don, Madeline, and David for joining us today. Isabella, any sort of last thoughts before we move on to the prize-giving portion of the evening?
I just want to say thank you to our lovely authors for joining us today, and thank you, David, for joining us at such an early time in Japan. And thank you for everyone who tuned in. It's so nice being part of this prompts community, and I hope that you all continue to just engage in prompts and join our contests, and one day you might see your own story in Prompted.
Amazing. Cool. All right. So in order to do this contest, basically anyone who's in here has to put a word in the chat here in YouTube, and I'll sort of pick randomly from that. Isabella, what is the word that everyone, hopefully something drawn from one of our stories today?
Lighthouse.
Lighthouse. One word, lighthouse. Everyone who wants to be in it, write down lighthouse. While everyone does that, there's some questions here related to the actual contest. But I really enjoy doing these live events because we actually get to see the authors, in person. Sometimes just reading all the stories coming in, it's tough to sort of know who is actually coming from, and what the rest of their life looks like. I was actually in Vegas for a conference last year, and I was speaking to an author there whose mother, she was an 80-year-old mother in Hawaii who was a writer, back in her younger days, and she'd just been put onto the Reedsy contest and submitting it there, and she talks about how, absolutely seemed to change everything, because she just found herself every Friday opening the emails and finding something from it, and, being able to sort of channel that creativity. So it's really genuinely amazing to see the sort of community that's come together.
Yes, definitely. And especially all our very devoted writers who without fail join every single week. That always really amazes and impresses me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I am going to Lighthouse. Okay, so we've got a bunch of people here. I've basically on the screen isolated everybody who's put it down. I'm going to slowly imagine I'm turning this massive wheel that will just tick over. Isabella, I'm going to need you to shout stop, and then I'm going to point out whatever I've got here.
Okay.
I'm basically swizzling up and down. Oh my god. It is.
Who is it?
It is our friend, Mike Rosenstein. Fantastic. Mike, you are the first winner. Send Isabella an email, isabella@reedsy, with your delivery address, and you shall have a stunning copy of Prompted Volume 4. Okay, the second one. I shall do the same thing again. The wheel is spinning. And just whenever you're ready, the shout stop.
Stop.
And it is Nicole Ann Keaton, the second lucky winner. Fantastic, Nicole Ann. If you want to drop Isabella an email, remember everyone to actually send the name of your handle here on YouTube. And
Yes. I'll be like, who is this?
it is one of these things. I think I was doing the admin for the previous ones. Like if it's in a country there's Amazon, really easy. We had one winner, I think, was in Vietnam, and I was like, I'm going to figure out how to mail a copy to Vietnam. But yeah, we did it in the end. Great. So Isabella, so what can we expect from prompts in the sort of near future?
Ooh, so we still have our current contest, which is illusion or reality. So that will be up until Friday, 11:59 p.m. EST. And then if that's not really your thing, or if you think, oh, I don't have enough time, I need a full week to write a story, then we have our next contest, which I will be posting on Friday. And it's cool because it's going to be a collaboration with Kobo Writing Life. And in addition to the $250 that the winner will get, they will also get a free e-reader. So yeah, if you want to win a free e-reader, join
You mean the
contest.
coveted Kobo Nook?
No.
What?
It's no. It's a color e-reader, which is I think even cooler. So if you
Okay.
want an e-reader with color,
Okay.
then that's a hint. That's actually maybe potentially the theme of this Friday's contest. It has something to do with color.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's exciting. Well, great. So join for that one. You can get involved with Kobo Writing Life and win yourself a colour e-reader. Fantastic. Well, Isabella, I'm really looking forward to the next issue. I believe you're working on that as we speak.
Yep, already started.
Nice. So yeah, there won't be as much of a gap between that one. And yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff happening on Reedsy Live. If you head to blog.reedsy.com/live, I've got some events popping up in the next... Actually, I've got nothing in March, but I've loaded up April. So get yourself ahead of that. And we've got the return of our book cover critique. So if you've created a book cover for something you've published, you can submit it. And we have a really fantastic designer, Tim Byrne, who will be critiquing it live. It should be a lot of fun. All right, Isabella, I want to thank you for joining. It wasn't too painful, was it?
I think overall I'm happy with how it went. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit nervous, but it's fine. The next time you see me for Prompted 5, I think I'll be much more confident and composed.
By then you'll be jaded and
Nah.
you become an empty live streaming husk like me. Cool. Well,
No,
thank
I
you for
think
putting
you're a
this
pro.
together. Yeah.
I wish I could be more like you.
Well, let's not embarrass ourselves. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you're watching this later, remember you can head to the video description and download your free digital copy of Prompted Volume 4. And if you could also, perhaps if you've downloaded it on Amazon, share a impartial review on Amazon. That will really help your community there and the other writers and help it reach new readers. Anyway, for now, it's goodbye from Isabella, goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Bye.